All right, y'all, it's 6 o'clock. It's time to get the party started. And let me just tell the few of you who are on here already, because you know people come in at their leisure, right off the top. Today is going to be one hell of a history lesson. So let me caution you early. While I run my pause for the cause and put my intro up, take the time out right quick. Grab yourself a libation. For those of you who don't know what that is a beverage. Grab your snacks or whatever it is that you need to get, because we about to get deep today. We're going to get into some stuff. I'm going to give you all some history lessons on the two main topics that we're going to discuss tonight, one of which has to do with the image of our people as it pertains to Aunt Jemima. And we're going to get a history lesson on them boys in blue. So, y'all hang out, get your beverages, don't get you something to drink. It's going to be one of them shows today. And get ready, because we about to get it in. All right. We here. That's all right. Sure, you make sure you catch me on the replay. It's all good. I appreciate you stopping in and checking on me anyway. It's a beautiful thing. I see you, L.A. Scott and Miss Phyllis. We see you. W.B. Reese is in the building. Val with me like always. Lamont, I got you. My man, Charlotte, I see you. I appreciate you all. Tania, thank you for coming by. Hey, we about to go, y'all. We finna get it in. I hope y'all on the train, because the train about to leave the station. All right. So check this out. I'm going to start with Miss Aunt Jemima and Quaker Oats. So look, today I had, well, first let me do this. Let me give y'all the backstory. Okay. I couldn't make my mind up what order I wanted to do this in, but I'm gonna give y'all the good stuff first. So here it is. Now, everybody knows that Quaker Oats, particularly in the light of all of the things that are taking place with racial injustice and black folks raising hell right now and looking for equality and justice in our system. That's all we ever asked for, was an equal shot, right? Well, with all of that going on, a lot of things are taking place. For example, the Confederate flags have come out of NASCAR, which, if you'd have asked me would I ever thought that would have happened, I'd have told you hell no. Policing is beginning to be checked as it should. We're going to get into that real deep today, too. And all of these monuments are being taken down, and the branding and marketing of products are changing. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I wished I had thought of earlier to show you exactly how much branding and marketing has changed over the years, and how some things now are just completely unacceptable in the way they've been advertised throughout history. As an example to what we're about to talk about with Aunt Jemima. Well, in case you didn't know, there was a lady who they called Aunt Jemima, and her real name was actually Nancy Green. Okay. Well, Nancy Green was what you would today, and especially in a time when she came about, she was actually what we would refer to as a true American success story. She was born a slave, believe it or not, in 1834 in Montgomery County, Kentucky. She became a wealthy superstar in the advertising world, and she was what we refer to as the first living trademark. So in other words, her image as a mammy, cook, ex-slave, is what was used to basically propel her into stardom, so to speak, along with the fact that she represented a recipe or a product that became actually very popular and made her very wealthy. Okay. She was 56 years old when she was selected as a spokesperson for a new ready-mix self-rising pancake flour and made her debut in 1893 at the Fair and Exposition in Chicago. She demonstrated the pancake mix and served thousands of pancakes and became an immediate star. She was a good storyteller, her personality was warm and appealing, and her showmanship was exceptional. Her exhibition booth drew so many people that special security personnel were assigned to keep the crowds moving. Nancy Green was signed to a lifetime contract. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway, I ain't gonna split hairs. She traveled on a promotional tour all over the country and was extremely well paid. Her financial freedom and stature as a national spokesperson enabled her to become a leading advocate against poverty. And in her favor of equal rights for folks in Chicago, she was also one of the very first African American missionary workers. She maintained her job until her death in 1923 at the age of 89. Nancy Green was a remarkable woman who achieved amazing success, and her history has basically just been erased. So, while that is a fantastic story, and it is one that we always want to hear because it is a good, it's the type of story that we want to hear from our people, especially during that time. You got to realize this woman was born a slave. She was able to make it out of that and become a very wealthy person. Well, see, there's a lot about that particular time period in history that a lot of people are not aware of. And the fact that there were a lot of blacks who did become very successful directly out of slavery. But of course, we had those who would see them destroyed and taken out and, of course, not recognized in the history books, which will bring me to the second part of this particular segment that we're going to do today. And I'm going to get to that because we're going to do some stuff talking about why that is. Now, so today I was having a conversation on one of my feeds with someone, and a lady named Lakeisha Smith Muhammad asked me why it mattered that Quaker Oats was taking down the image of Aunt Jemima in their production line. And I, for one, am glad that they are. Not because I don't respect the journey that Nancy Green, not Aunt Jemima, took to be who she is, but because of the changing times that we currently live in and the times moving up toward where we are today. Understand that imagery and perception go an awfully long way in the way other people treat you. Unfortunately, we are a group of people in this country that for many, many years hinged our existence on the acceptance and assimilation to white life. And because they are the ones who control and have controlled for as long as there was an America, the way things are done and the social cues that we all take in order to function within this society, everyone who is not them has had to assimilate in some way in order to survive in their world. We can't say it's our world, although we built it. But the fact is, we still don't control it. So my answer to her is that this is about imagery. The dehumanization of black people is the very way others continue to develop and manifest and reinforce the stereotypes that they have about us. When a young person, for example, could call a waitress and see a woman and think to himself, Aunt Jemima. Now, I made a joke yesterday because I was talking about how we used to act as children and we had, we would say stuff like, ain't your mama on the pancake box. That was a funny thing to us. And as we moved into getting older, of course, when you start to realize what you're saying and you're not you're thinking, oh, it's no big deal. You start to realize these things and it's no longer funny. But a child might say, might call some woman who is working and doing her thing Aunt Jemima, just because in his mind, the imagery might fit that view. There are a lot of ways that black folks are viewed in the world. And here's something that I think a lot of people miss. The average, and you can ask your white friends, people that you know, you can ask the average person what they think about black life and where they get the ideas about how black life is. And most of them will tell you that they rarely, if ever, have broken bread or hung around us. Their images that the ideas that they get about black life generally come through the media. Now we have social media, so they come through Facebook, they come through television and the different images. Now we often have movies that'll come out and some people will say, oh, that's real negative. And then you have people, and I'm one of those people because I can't stand stereotypical stuff that I see all the time. And it's always, the black people are always the criminals. They're always this, they're always that, the pimps, the hoes, the list goes on. If you remember when Robert Townsend put out the movie Hollywood Shuffle and he was making an example of that. Well, when you start to look at the way we are viewed because of media, then you have to ask yourself, who controls the media? Well, of course, we don't. We know this. And in not being able to control the media, we don't control our own image and we don't control the way the rest of the world views us, which is why you can go to other countries right now to this day and hear terms used about you as a black person that were born here in America, because that's their vision and what they've been told about what and who we are. OK, so there's a level of conditioning that takes place. It makes it easy for others to accept us in certain lights, and they have expectations about our behavior and the way we do things off the bat. See a black person, you automatically think, well, they're going to be this way, which places us into a sort of a blanketed category, which I'm going to get to some blanketed categories later on, but just goes to show you how we all get lumped together. If you riding, I can remember once, and I told this story before, while I was riding the train, I was on my way out to Skokie. I was out there on that Skokie Swift one day, going out toward damn, I can't even think of the dang on suburb. Anyway, going out there, and there was another guy on the bus, on the L, black guy, and he must have done something kind of crazy. But when he did it, the other white people looked at me as though I had the answer. Like, don't y'all all stick together? Ain't you supposed to know something or say something? And I'm sitting there like, hey, bro, what do you expect from me? I don't even know him. But this is the vision that they have oftentimes of us, which is why when someone is accosted by the police out there in public or something happens, immediately the question is, what did that black guy do wrong? The police gave you an order. You're supposed to follow it. Now, I want y'all to remember, now pay attention to what I'm saying right now, because I'm going to show you how this applies to the second story, dealing with the police. Now, if the way the Aunt Jemima character is portrayed during a time when that was acceptable, because that was all they expected from black women, that's fine. But we don't live in that time anymore. And no black woman that I am aware of dresses that way and carries the sort of demeanor that she was expected to carry during that time as a cook and a slave, more or less. And here's what you have to understand. Good evening, Mary. Thank you for checking in. I see you, Don. What? Ken, I appreciate you. Michael Samsonite, my man, Will. The thing is this. We have to be very, very careful about how we allow the world to envision us. Now, she was portrayed more or less, I guess, as a servant, of course. But when you do your history, and I told y'all this is going to be a history lesson for y'all that checked in late, I'm telling you now, Today is History Day. I'm giving y'all history lessons on and how these things pertain to where we are right now. I'm gonna show you how we tie it together. Now, she was viewed as, of course, a typical mammy, Aunt Jemima. That's why they gave her the nickname or put that moniker branding on that package. Her name was Nancy Green. She was the first living branded icon. Her name was Nancy Green, not Aunt Jemima. But see, they need that Aunt Jemima because she's non-threatening that way. And in that time, that was probably perfectly acceptable. Obviously, it was a financial windfall for not only her, but the company that produced the product. Now, as we move forward into the history of this thing, having had the ability to make the kind of money that she did and be successful in the late 1800s as she was, that kind of set her apart. And again, it's an American success story, Nancy Green. And I'm going to continue to say her name because every time from now on, if you run across the Aunt Jemima label, I want you to think to yourself, that's Nancy Green, because that's her name. Now, as time goes on, and we have moved into an era where women's rights are a thing, civil rights are a thing, equality for black people is a thing, we have to begin to uncondition ourselves and step away from these sorts of images. Now, it seemed pretty impotent. I mean, not a big deal, especially now, because people still buy it and nobody even thought about it, really, to be honest with you. We've been conditioned for so long that this is what it is that we didn't even think twice about, well, what's the big deal? Ain't no big deal. So what? They got a black woman wearing a head wrap, which some of y'all, not even a head wrap, a kerchief on her head and walking around out here. We didn't think about how that looks. Now, and I ain't gonna lie to y'all, looks to me are important. But I'm gonna give you a little food for thought. And I want you to give me answers. Give me answers. If right now, Quaker Oats said, we're gonna put out a scholarship for black students, and we're gonna call it the Aunt Jemima Scholarship. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that the backlash from that would be epic. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that black folks would lose their minds if they said this is the Aunt Jemima Scholarship. Let's see if your child can get one. Black people heads would explode. Exactly, Michael Samsonite's perception. Now, on the other hand, if they said this is the Nancy Green Scholarship, who was a successful entrepreneur in the late 1800s, after having been born a slave, it would change the narrative. See how that works? That's why you got to be careful. Perception is everything. It's extremely important. So now here we are. They're removing monuments and taking down all of these symbols of the past and the history, which I think at this point in our history have become extremely necessary. But the question is, because we don't still have our women standing in the kitchen cooking, because that's the only work they could get. Now, I want you to think about what I just said, and I know it didn't sound very important, but let me explain something to you. The only work they could get. Here's what you need to know about history as it pertains to this. After slavery, they actually put laws on the books that only allowed black people to work in certain jobs, regardless of their skill level and ability to move forward. There were states that said that as a black woman, you could only work in a kitchen. You could only be a nursemaid or whatever other similar thing to what you were doing on a plantation prior to being freed. Black men could only work in smithing or other areas that were very similar to the way they did in slavery. They could pick, and they could, some of them could do, very few could do the manual labors that they were once doing for free. And they weren't going to get much for it. Why? Because their skin was black. All of these images are outdated concepts. But sadly, these concepts still reside in the minds of those who would still intend to oppress. They would prefer to keep us in a financially strapped condition. You think about it, black folks have already been stripped of generational wealth and denied the opportunities to build more. See Black Wall Street. See Rosewood, Florida. See Philadelphia, Chicago, St. Louis. The list goes on and on and on. Every time a black community has become self-sufficient, it has been destroyed. Then you'll have those who say black people are lazy and they should pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But we already know that once those bootstraps are in the position to be pulled up, somebody gonna come along and snatch them and then claim, why aren't you pulling yourself up by your bootstraps? Well, it might be because you snatched them and destroyed them. Michael Samsonite says they're angry about the removal of the statues and monuments, not understanding that these items are being moved to museums. Michael Samsonite, it doesn't matter where they're being moved. I have yet to see any statues or monuments of Hitler in Europe, or any statues and monuments and flags, Nazi swastikas flying freely above Germany or any other country in that region where Jews reside. And you will not see it because they're not standing for it, nor should we have. So here we are. Now, we have to, at some point, decide what we're going to accept and what we're not. There's a history and a legacy to everything. There's always a story behind the story. And this is where, this is where we are. I'm going to move this over now and tie it directly to why everything that's happening is happening where, for example, the police are concerned. See, people like Nancy Green, a.k.a. Aunt Jemima, were the reason why the next part of this becomes interesting. As it stands today, it appears that our police across the nation are coming down with a little bit of an epidemic called the Blue Flu. They are calling off work. They've decided they don't want to come in. And I even saw an article earlier today. It might have been a news story. I've seen several. And they talked about, they felt like they were being treated like thugs and they were being treated like animals and nobody was respecting them. Well, imagine that. You know what they say, right? It ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun. And right now, we're dealing with a situation where police officers are feeling some kind of way because they being called on the carpet for their nonsense. So suddenly, police officers across these United States are walking off the job, or should I say calling in sick. Either way, it's the same thing. the Blue Flu, y'all. And why? They're angry because they no longer have the freedom to beat people, to lie, to cheat, to dehumanize, and murder black people at will. And they're angry about that. Because, see, here's the thing. If they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, this wouldn't be affecting the way they feel and it wouldn't bother them. It's that they know they're going to do something wrong, so they don't want to be called on the carpet. Now, I can tell you, Kim Shelton says, I think they said 5 resigned today here in Indy. Good. Goodbye. We're not going to miss bad cops, but I can tell you why a lot of them are resigning. They're not making a stand. I think they may look like they're taking a stand, but let me tell you something. A lot of them are quitting because they know they've been tapping into the pension funds. They've been shaking down petty criminals. They don't want to risk losing their pension when they get fired. See, if you resign, you can go on and get that. They've been abusive officers to the general public, or they know they're next. They know that they are going to be under investigation next because they know that they've done dirt and it's going to come back to kick them in their ass. Many of them were never there to serve or protect anyone. They were just there for the check and the benefits. But let's go back. Today, I heard that Breonna Taylor, her case is being looked at very closely right now. It has been said that charges are probably going to be coming for those officers who ran up in her apartment, murdered her, shot at her man, then they arrested him and claimed that he shot at the police and they wanted to charge him with assault on a police officer. Well, they had, of course, to let him go. But now it appears that these officers are about to get charged because they were dead wrong for multiple reasons. And they lay those out in the case that is going to be coming. So now all across America, these police officers, and I'll be honest with you, I don't give a damn if they quit. Because the ones that's quitting wasn't worth their salt anyway. That's proof they wasn't worth their salt. That's proof that they've been doing wrong all along and they don't want to get caught. Because now a lot of these cases are becoming retroactive. Now a lot of these cases, they're starting to recall and look back up and go over the evidence. And if they find wrongdoing, these officers are being called on the carpet and they're being charged. Man, look, for the first time in history, criminals are actually being charged. That in itself is amazing. I think that if officers were doing what they were supposed to do in the first place, they would have no problems with what's going on. And in fact, they would get on board with it. The idea that many of these officers don't find anything wrong with an unarmed man being shot in the back twice, another round hitting another vehicle with a family in it, and they think that this man is supposed to be, oops, oh, my bad, and walk away, it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes about the mindsets and the ideologies that these officers harbor. My personal opinion, we don't need that in our society. I personally am glad that officers are finally having to face consequences of wrongdoing and law breaking. The unfair practices of railroading and plea bargains for innocent victims of criminal cops. Again, it ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun. Now these officers are going to have to deal within the same crooked system that has railroaded so many of our people into jail cells who don't belong there, all because they, in their egos and their overzealous behavior and their cocky attitudes, decided that they should be there. See, the tables are turning and the scales of justice are about to level out. I never thought I would see it in my lifetime, but here we are. It's happening. Like it, don't matter. It's going down. And I tell you like this. One thing you can't tell me, and we ain't gonna sugarcoat it, we ain't gonna play no games. You know, I got people running around here, they want to hoop and holler about, you know, the good cops. Let me tell y'all something. It's plenty of crooked cops out there. It's plenty of law-breaking, criminal cops. I'm not gonna call them police officers out there. And I know it for a fact. I know what I've seen with my own eyes. I know what I've dealt with. Okay. I wasn't always sitting in a place like this behind a microphone. I was in them streets too. And I can tell you firsthand, I've seen some dirt by some police officers, and that completely and thoroughly abuse, use, misuse their authority and their power on levels that are probably unimaginable to some people. I know what I've seen. You know, when the so-called good officers stand by, now I'm a civilian. I know what I've seen. But when the so-called good officers, you know, the ones everybody always say, well, you know, it's mostly good officers out there. Well, if there's more good officers than there are bad, explain to me how the bad officers keep getting away with the things they get away with. Explain to me why other agencies will hire an officer who they know has a record of wrongdoing, who they know has a history of misconduct. Why would you hire this person? Why would you put your department under that kind of liability? Now it's time to pay the piper. You know, an interesting thing, too, I found out today is that the district attorney in Atlanta is now receiving death threats. Now, are these them good officers threatening the death, the death of the district attorney? Who's that angry? Why would you threaten the life of the district attorney as a good cop? The general public doing it? Guess what? They should be locked up. See, this is the problem. Everybody want to play these games, these passive aggressive, believe what I tell you, not what you see. Them days over. It's time to pay the piper, baby. It's time. And it's coming down. Whether they like it, don't like it, it don't matter. It's happening. When another officer stands by and watches his colleague break the law, and they do often, and still think that he has the right to call himself a good cop, let me tell you, I beg to differ. Because if you would lock me up for an infraction, then you should be locking up that other cop who's doing the very dirt that you call yourself wanting to go after the general public for. So-called good officers don't stand by and watch the law being broken by bad officers and then say nothing. They don't say anything because they either don't care or they support their fellow gang members. What'd I say? I said their fellow gang members. When you got people, see that the behavior that they have reminds me of gang life. It reminds me of you can do no wrong no matter what you do, and I'm going to get your back because I'm your fellow gang member. That's the behavior that they have. Forget their oath. Forget all of that. Speaking of oaths. Oh, and you know, and the other thing is, it bothers me that even the officers who do stand by, many of whom they're either in collusion with the bad officers, or they're being bullied like gangs. A gang, and I can tell you firsthand, I'm from a city where gangs were a major part of life. And as you were coming up, the majority of people who knew anything about that life, as we were coming up, you had a choice. You either got down or you laid down. Those were your options. In other words, you gonna join us or we gonna make your life a living hell. So I'm guessing that these police officers have to suffer from the same sort of bullying. You're gonna join us, or we're going to make your life a living hell.